That's it.
Yep. That's it. That'll take the whole 2 hours.
Don't let it fool you.
Kendall, are you doing both or speak?
Me. She's doing both.
Speaky, sure, I wrote it down. Oh,
Yeah, it was one.
You're not just being.
Yeah, it's not.
They don't care. We'll follow up with that.
That's right.
I guess.
Hello.
Great.
I need that. Not this one here, but, comments.
How are you?
Oh, in here. They said. And then you need to think about setup for the siege.
I have had that on my
Yeah.
radar, you
That's
know,
why I asked.
Times, I'm like, yeah, 'cause, I mean, it was fine, but I did it myself.
yeah.
Because if they wanna do 200,000, we need more of these
Yeah.
stacked up and push it back.
That's
Someone. That one and after.
Yeah, it was.
No, you see what I want to see.
He's, yeah.
I mean.
You're really gonna eat that in front of us?
So, yeah, but.
Yes.
Yeah, not as bad as the time that all the council members got like ice cream.
Yeah,
That's
that
true. Watch them
Have
eat that.
Have you tried the pistachio? Like, with ice cream?
On my way.
Yeah. I enjoy
Yeah,
it.
there.
You can get a portion.
I think that.
Right.
Pistachio, yeah, but.
I think that there's just ice cream. You have the ice cream sandwich.
I have not.
Oh, if you're looking for something that's a little less, they love, you're looking for something that's alive, but not too thick.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do, that I was. I, the pistachio, I like pistachio, I've tried having guys and veggies and all.
Yeah.
New ones or like the men, big pistachio was like.
Bring the right out.
No, and then I had the.
I guess they don't think I could, there might be like.
So I like the cookie flavors.
Yes, they have several of those.
Yeah, so I get the coupons there, where cookies and cream or their brown batter.
Yes, those are very popular.
Yeah,
They with little.
I know, I'm just thinking,
Right.
so that's what it is.
Good evening. This meeting will come to order. This is a council study session. It's not one of our normal council meetings. So our attire is probably a little less than what you would expect in more formal situations. With that, would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, with that, could we have the chief clerk or the individual in his stead, please read the roll call?
Deputy Mayor King,
Present.
Councilmember Gilliam,
Excused?
Councilmember Whitting,
Present.
Councilmember Dorr,
Excused?
Councilmember Adler,
Present.
Councilmember Johnson,
Present.
Mayor Castema.
Present. With that, I'd like to have a approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to do that?
Motion to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Let's move on to the agenda items. Just so that the public who is watching this understands, this is a study session. Again, it's not one of our normal council meetings that are a little bit more formal. This is a time when we just frankly study an issue as the word expressly says. And this evening, we'll be talking about zoning changes in the city of Puyallup. We'll be talking about potential changes in the neighborhoods, pretty important information. And we'll have staff, we'll have other people who will go ahead and speak. With that, we have under 1A, Puyallup let's see, housing element update, Puyallup 2044 housing element update. And if we could have staff come forward, Senior Planner Kendall Walls, if you could give a presentation, we appreciate that.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. So as you mentioned, our first item here is on the housing element update for our comprehensive periodic update. And for tonight's presentation, I'll do a quick project status, go over some background and the legislative requirements related to the housing update, walk through kind of the high level draft goals and policies and next steps. So right now we actually just wrapped up some of our community priorities engagement. So we are kind of taking a look at the information that we've received from the public and compiling that. And we are also getting ready to issue the draft environmental impact statement for the periodic update. That is looking like it will be issued next week, and that'll be issued for public comment. And we're also continuing to work on the draft future land use map and just draft elements of the comprehensive plan, which will then kind of go for the final process later this year. So for some background on the housing policy updates, these major changes stem from requirements from changes in state law. This includes consistency with Pierce County planning policies, as well as the regional growth strategy from Puget Sound Regional Council. There's also recommended changes from planning documents and assessments like our housing action plan and a housing equity analysis report that our consultants compiled for us. That kind of looked at the comp plan as a whole and kind of areas that could use some improvement, as well as changes driven by community input and staff recommendations. Some of those have already been reflected in some new proposed guiding principles for the comp plan update. And then we're anticipating some changes that could come out of the environmental impact statement. That's obviously pending because that hasn't gone through that full process yet. So for the housing legislation, these are kind of the top ones that come to mind when we're talking about housing. The first is House Bill 1220, which deals with housing affordability, and this is where housing need and targets are broken by income brackets, which we'll have a slide that kind of shows what that looks like for Puyallup and what we need to plan for, as well as addressing disparate impacts and policies that have contributed to that, as well as emergency housing and shelter. This was initially worked on kind of, I believe, late 2021 when that legislation came out. There's still a little bit more work that we need to do with additional information that we've received and kind of looking more specifically at the emergency housing aspect. And House Bill 1110 is the middle housing legislation that Council we've talked about with you before. I know you're familiar with that one, but that is, for the public's sake, that is the legislation that requires us to allow at minimum duplexes in all of our single family residential zones, as well as up to 4 units within a radius around our sounder station, and 4 units per lot if 1 unit is affordable. And then the House Bill 1337 has to do with accessory dwelling units. So there's just some different requirements that we need to allow in code for those types of units. So to take a look at the affordability levels that this is related to that House Bill 1220. The county works with cities to allocate the countywide housing needs. And then the Department of Commerce had a tool developed that we used to determine kind of how these then are allocated based on the income levels in the city. And so for the city of Puyallup, this is how it was broken out. It's kind of in a U shape. So we have the higher income levels, it's kind of more lower need for our moderate income. And then it kind of increases from the low to extremely low income brackets. So just thinking about how do we plan for this, especially for like our low income levels, really the type of housing that we would be looking at is more multifamily. So making sure that we have enough land area zoned for multifamily land capacity and allowed densities that we can then accommodate these types of housing for our community. To briefly touch on the narrative updates. So that was provided in your packet, a draft of kind of the meat of the element itself, and then as well as the policies. So, but first looking at the narrative, it includes a summary of Puyallup's housing needs. So it includes some key findings that came out of the assessment that was done with the Housing Action Plan, but then some of the numbers have been updated with more recent housing and demographic data since the Housing Action Plan was from 2020, or the needs assessment was. And then there will be full details on that in the appendix of the comprehensive plan. So planning for future needs, we will be looking again at the income brackets, and you can see we have kind of a table in the narrative that shows what that breakout is, and then we will need to show land capacity. This is saying TBD right now because we need to wait for that finalized land use map, which we kind of have to get through the environmental impact statement process to figure out the preferred alternative, and that will kind of advise how we update that portion of the narrative. And then there's just a summary of policies and key things, state and regional requirements, and some topic areas from housing quality and stability to addressing homelessness and regional collaboration. So a lot of different topic areas there. So for the policy updates, we have some slides that include the state law just for reference, really. We've kind of identified some specific topic areas. So we have housing affordability, and then to the right shows the sections of the state statute that we see falling within that topic area. So there's housing affordability, housing supply and diversity of housing choices, housing equity and anti-displacement, and then addressing homelessness and housing instability. So we'll kind of walk through those different categories. This is the full section, which is just there for reference, but we have it clipped by each of the sections. So again, this is the housing affordability. And then we'll move on to the specific information for the city here. So our current comprehensive plan has some existing goals. Goal 5 and 9 there on the slide. And we are needing to update the plan to accommodate those affordable housing affordable to all income levels that we showed on a previous slide to be consistent with GMA, and then also integrating affordable strategies from our housing action plan. So some high level ways or areas that we've noted for key policy moves are addressing those income levels, as well as ensuring that we have adequate land capacity to accommodate those affordable units by income level. And then also strengthening policies to support development of government assisted housing and other housing to meet the needs of our lower income residents. That one is also supported by our housing action plan. And then looking at strengthening our current policy related to preservation and investment in rehabilitation of low-cost housing to help maintain affordability of those units. So the next topic area is housing supply and diversity of housing choices. We have a few different or several comp plan policies that touch on that topic area already. We will need to do some updates to accommodate our new housing targets. So we have to plan for about 7,500 new units by 2044. And then also allowing for more middle housing to be consistent with House Bill 1110, as well as increasing flexibility for ADUs to be consistent with the other new legislation. So we'll be looking at adding policies to support moderate density housing and middle housing, as well as accessory dwelling units within our residential neighborhoods. That's also one that would be consistent with our housing action plan. Also allowing for more middle scale housing in single family zones, and encouraging higher density housing in our centers and near transit or amenities is also something that we'll be looking at, and that's from the regional strategy. So the next one is housing equity and displacement. We have a draft guiding principle related to an inclusive community, and some policy updates for the element are to recognize disparities in homeownership for communities of color, identifying strategies to prevent displacement due to market pressures, increasing housing in close proximity to living wage jobs and transit to provide some more opportunities, and mitigating past harms caused by racially biased policies. Really, in our initial review, we don't have existing policies that are doing that are explicitly causing harm, but we could maybe do some refinement in areas that could have some indirect impacts. So some key policy moves are looking at removing or revising policies that may have had some impacts, disparate impacts on historically marginalized racial or ethnic groups. Also looking at adding policies to prevent or mitigate residential displacement and exclusion in housing, expanding opportunities for more affordable homeownership. That comes out of House Bill 1220, but is also a city priority. And then also engaging with communities most impacted to help identify challenges and inform strategies. So the next topic area is addressing homelessness and housing instability. And we already have a goal and policy related to this. And really we'll be looking at allowing a wider range of housing and emergency shelter options, to address homelessness, to be consistent with state law that looks at transitional housing, emergency housing, as well as permanent supportive and emergency shelters, and ensuring that we have sufficient land capacity and supportive policies to support those needs. And then this, again, the key policy move is just ensure that we have adequate land capacity. We have done some work, but we just need to make sure that we can meet the number of beds that were required to accommodate for emergency housing in the city. So that is kind of the overview of those housing policy moves that we're planning. This is kind of an opportunity for discussion on just those moves in general. And then we do have some discussion points related to middle housing that we'd like to talk through with council.
Questions? Okay, hearing none, proceed.
Okay. So for middle housing policy, so this is related to the House Bill 1110. Again, the minimum requirements for that are allowing duplexes on all single family lots, as well as up to 4 units if it's within a quarter mile of a major transit stop. And within the city of Puyallup, that is just the Sounder Station, or up to 4 units on a lot when at least 1 unit is affordable. So we talked to Planning Commission, the Community Advisory Group, as well as the public on if we were to consider going beyond those minimum requirements, where should we kind of focus that energy? What makes sense for allowing for more middle housing in the city? And so some areas that were discussed were near parks and schools, near transit, specifically looking at like the transit center, South Hill Transit Center near the mall, or the South Hill Park and Ride. Also near our regional growth centers or near our multifamily areas, should we consider all of those? Should we just scale back and just focus on the minimum requirements? So when we met with the community advisory group, we hadn't fully refined the different options. We kind of had our first discussion with them. So the conversation was generally in support of expanding options and kind of exploring that further. They did specifically kind of talk about maybe it makes sense around the South Hill Transit Center and the South Hill Park and Ride, kind of transit options in that way, as well as, the Sounder Station. There was support for a flexibility and wider variety of housing options, so of middle housing options in our single family neighborhoods, and then also recommended that we maybe consider if there are certain types of middle housing that are appropriate for different areas in the city. We also talked to Planning Commission, and in general, the Planning Commission had a general consensus of just expanding that buffer around the Sounder Station from a quarter mile to a half mile. And then we had a few commissioners that expressed support for expanding middle housing kind of for all the areas that we looked at, which at the time, the maps that we worked through with them did not include schools, but it included all those other options that I talked about on the last slide. And then at least one commissioner expressed that they'd like to see us kind of just stick to the minimum requirements, but bump up the buffer around the Sounder Station. They were still in favor of. So we also did some public outreach on this topic. We were at a farmer's market in May. We also had a board at the Meeker Days booth, the city's Meeker Days booth, and we also had it posted at the public library and got some feedback that way. And largely what we heard from the public was general support for near parks and schools, as well as transit. And then there were a number that were also supportive of just all areas in general. So that's why we're here also to talk to you tonight, because we've kind of had a little mix of feedback from all different areas, and we'd like to kind of further refine that and get council's input and direction. So we kind of focus our energy that way. I did add a slide that I hope will kind of help the discussion. It's just trying to show that we have different options that we could consider, you know, anywhere from one being the minimum compliance to applying all options. And we kind of, there's not really a specified order here. You could do any combination of the in-between, but we kind of just ordered it from the feedback we heard, you know, expanding that buffer around the sounder station. Maybe there's the transit options on South Hill that we could focus on, parks, schools, or regional growth centers, and multifamily areas. Or do we want to consider all of those for expanding middle housing options throughout the city? So I'll stop there.
Okay, do we have any questions? Councilmember Whitting.
Not so much questions, but comments. I'd love to weigh in on these sorts of things. Thank you. So looking at your slide there, I think I'm in favor of expanding the buffer to a half mile, both around the South Hill Transit Center and the downtown train station. In terms of some of the other aspects of the thing, there was some items in our housing action plan that I've been wanting to see happen. So let me just kind of throw those on the hopper too. One of our things that we had in our housing action plan was to combine our RS10 and RS8 categories and our RS6s and 4s. Combine those two. That seemed like a very reasonable approach to encourage some additional density without really changing the character of our communities. One of our objectives here is to maintain the character of Puyallup, but making some of these smaller changes that without throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I think we can make some significant progress. In terms of the missing middle category, we've got some very nice missing middle communities. There's up by Bradley Lake, there's a really nice one there that's home for a lot of nice families. It's an attractive neighborhood. I think allowing that throughout our city, it doesn't detract from the neighbors. It's quality housing. I think doing more of that will allow people, make our average affordability a little better. Duplexes, there's some neighborhoods with duplexes that you drive through and you don't even really realize you're in a neighborhood with duplexes until you kind of say, oh, there's two front doors on that 2-car garage. So I think we can do more of that. Some of the neighborhood infill, I know Tacoma's done some work for corner lots. They allow some they can create 2 housing units, one facing each street. So again, it doesn't change the character of the neighborhood. Everything looks kind of the same, but you get some more density. So I think some of those strategies are really important. One of the things that I've heard pretty clearly from my colleagues and myself is that we want to encourage home ownership. So these strategies are ones that can encourage home ownership. And one of the things that I really want to emphasize is fee simple. We've talked a lot about fee simple homes. Again, that's home ownership, but less expensive because there's less, land. Land is a valuable commodity. So if we can put more houses in a smaller area, then that's great. And then provide some recreational areas nearby. I think that's a great strategy for us. Then moving on to the rental sector, one way of assuring that units stay affordable is to make them smaller. And if all of our rental units are 800 square feet or so, those are going to be reasonably expensive and hard for people to afford. But if we have micro units, and some of the micro units I've looked at in Tacoma are in the 200 square foot range, those are going to be affordable in perpetuity just because they're little. And so I think having some of that as well would be beneficial. And another way of encouraging affordability is to give some development incentives to our developers, and so that the idea that we have might provide some fee waivers for attainable housing or expedited permitting for developments with affordable units. I think that would be a way of encouraging some smaller units, affordable units. We've done some work on the multifamily tax exemption. I think that's been a step in the right direction. But I really see our comp plan as being an opportunity to not take one small step for a man, but a great leap for Puyallup. So I'm really hopeful that we can make some significant changes in our code and to advance the cause of affordable housing so that our kids can afford to live in this town and buy homes, and as they're just getting started, have affordable units where they can have a low rental rate so that they can save up some money to make a down payment. So those are kind of my thoughts on some of these things, and I am excited to see what comes of all that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Kendall, I was looking at the slide here, this middle housing pictorial slide. And so give me a little bit of, if I understand correctly, if we were going into the fee simple home style where there was home ownership involved, as Councilor Whitting had mentioned, wouldn't that typically fall in line more with a townhome style versus a triplex, duplex, or stacked duplex style? Isn't that fairly consistent with how that would typically be sold or built?
I think typically it is townhomes, but I believe it can be done for duplexes as well.
Yeah, okay. So with that in mind, the various options, if you want any weigh in for me, I would put in top priority the townhomes as a first choice of preference for encouraged development, with a contingency of a fee simple homeownership style as a contingency for that. Second would be the cottage housing style, where there's independent units in a cluster that would be sold independently. And I do believe we have some of that going up the hill on 9th Street. I think some of those, is it that one station right by the cemetery? Is there some cottage housing in there too? That
I don't believe we have existing cottage housing.
we don't. Okay. There was one development as you go up 9th Street Hill, heading to South Hill. It's something station development. I thought they had some form of cottage style housing, but maybe I'm mistaken. I check into that. But anyway, I would support that secondarily. I'm against the duplex stack side by side and triplex. If that's just another form of rentals, I just think I would not be encouraging that. I do want to make a point, and I think that perhaps the mayor may not agree or may agree with me. You know, we're looking for high density housing and localized around parks and schools and you know, high transit areas. And the state is, in some sense, by some of these bills, mandating it across the every city across the state, you know, with their good intentioned you know, idealism behind it, which, you know, I can't speak to if it's sincere or not. But the concern I have is if the state is mandating high density housing, and if the key to wealth is to provide home ownership equity for people to start out and build upon, why is it that the state not fixing the condo reform liabilities? So that's not a question to answer, it's simply a question to ponder. If you really want high density and you want to have some affordable middle housing, some small condos with some open doors for the condo reform laws could be very, very helpful. So I would challenge my colleagues, state colleagues in the House and Senate to please look at that, and that might encourage some of the things that we're after. And then I'm not quite sure what to think about the emergency housing presentation you gave there. I'll need to study that a little bit more. I have some mixed feelings about who's responsible for that, and I'm not quite sure that cities, individual cities, are the entity that was designed to handle such a massive national and statewide issue. I really think some of that should be provided by the national and state level to address this issue, as they've done in times past. We've gone through depressions and things. So I'm not convinced that the cities bear that responsibility. And so I would kind of want to study that some more. Other than that, that's all I had, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Let me just make a few comments regarding this. I think there's a lot of good statements that people have made here this evening. Home ownership being one of them, looking for fee simple alternatives for people so that they can actually own a piece of the rock. I would say that the policies put forward by the legislature do exactly the opposite of that. They go into neighborhoods like mine in the valley, and in essence, they turn those neighborhoods away from single family homes, and they turn them into rentals. That's what will happen with this particular bill. And if we implement what they have asked us to do in the legislature, and I think it will have dire consequences for the city of Puyallup and other cities similarly sized in Washington State. It will take, and I will be opposing this, by the way, the legislation in Olympia is trying to require us to divide every single family resident lot in half, correct? And then each one of those lots to have 2 ADUs. Now, I want you to imagine that in the valley. Single family home now has 2 homes on it, has 2 ADUs. So look across the street at that house that has 1 house, you'll have 6. And right now, the average house has about 2 cars. The legislature wants us to not have any auto allowance whatsoever, correct? No allowance for cars. So now if there's 2 cars per household, you'll have 12 cars. The infrastructure cannot handle it in our community. For us to have where there is 1 home, now up to 6 homes with all of the impact that has on the infrastructure. And they specifically say that we cannot ask for allowances for parking and the other aspects of that they'll impact the community. In my neighborhood, we have a lot of homes that are turning into rentals. Investment bankers are buying homes, anything that comes available. In fact, the estimates are that 40% of single family rentals will be owned by investment bankers. You name them, who they are, JP Chase and other banks out there will go ahead and buy these and in essence turn our residents into renters. And so Councilmember Johnson, you're absolutely right. Councilmember Whitting, you're correct when we want people to have home ownership, but the policies that they're asking us to implement will not do that. It will take our single family residents and it will turn them into nothing but renters. And let me tell you how that happens. I've seen it in my neighborhood, and I have my neighborhood, Stewart Elementary School is a Title I free and reduced lunch, about 56%. It's kind of your average hardworking, neighborhood. I grew up there. I still live in the same house. But people come in and they'll buy a house, and we allow ADUs. We already do that. And they'll buy an ADU for a relative. But when they sell it, they put in the price of the home, but the price of the rental, what they would get for rent in addition to that, and they charge for that. So the homes that used to cost $400,000 now cost $800,000 in my neighborhood because now they're rental units. So people come in and they buy those homes, and now they rent the house and the ADU out, and forever that home is off the market as a single family resident. Well, can you imagine when that turns into 6 different residences? And this is what's possible in our downtown neighborhoods if we do what they in fact want us to do. So I am of the opinion that, on the least bit of this, we, at a minimum, we'll do the requirement of a quarter of a mile. But I will say this is another aspect I think we have to seriously explore. The state legislature exempted all of the wealthy areas in Washington state from any of these requirements. And they did that by exempting HOAs. And not only did they exempt HOAs, but they gave them 3 months for current HOAs to go out there and place even more restrictive regulations on it before the bill went into effect. And this is what the Seattle Times said about what they're trying to implement in cities like ours. Seattle Times said affluent areas, often historically exclusive and less diverse, retain their single-family home charm, while poor neighborhoods like mine are forced to adapt, potentially leading to overcrowding and infrastructure stress. The selective application undermines the bill's intent to provide more housing options equitably and reinforces the socioeconomic divides that we have in this country. So actually, if we implement this thing, we just divide this community. And one thing we have always said is that in Puyallup, we're all in it together. We don't treat one neighborhood different than another. We are equally as safe in one neighborhood and another. And if I have a single family home, I deserve the same sort of protections as a single family home on South Hill, for example. But they exempt all those different HOAs, even though on many circumstances, they have gladly usurped HOA covenants in Washington state. And I can give you example after example after example where they've done that. But they didn't do it here because they couldn't get it passed, because the wealthy people of Washington state would not stand for this. So I look upon what you're doing with a very jaundiced eye. And I think that once the people of Puyallup who own single family residences actually know about what's going on. I know your surveys. I've read your surveys, the one you recently did. I went online, I looked at that. I see what you do in the park. The people who say those suggestions and identify those suggestions, you never identify the cost. You never say that the single family residences, you could have 6 homes there instead of just 1. If you go ahead and adopt many of the policies that they say mandated, I think we should fight those mandates. But nevertheless, if we adopt those policies, 6 homes, they don't understand the cost that goes along with that. So I take the suggestions that you have as, a wish list of what people would like. But John Palmer was very good at this when he was on the council. He and I both believe that the strength of Puyallup is in our neighborhoods. Our neighborhoods are where the families grow up, where generations live, and then our downtown is our commons area, but our strength is our powerful neighborhoods. And what this does and what this will do is take all the private ownership or a substantial portion of it and remove it. It will replace the people who have a piece of rock with nothing but rentals. And if you think that I'm kidding, I just talked to a real estate agent today who told me that investors are talking about ADUs. That's what they're talking about. They want ADUs badly. They want to buy property, any property that can have the ability to shoot an ADU in there. That's what they want because they want to turn it into rentals. And I live on 8th Avenue. I'm no secret. Okay. I've lived there my whole life. Go down and look at my neighborhood. We have every type of experiment that you have looked at when it comes to housing. And I guarantee you, because I know, because people call my home every day, or not every day, but at least once a week. I apologize. Once a week wanting to buy it. Okay. And they are only looking at the residents, the investors are, to where they can fit an ADU and turn it into a rental. And my neighborhood will become full of rentals. No longer will people own a piece of the rock. And then finally, I do want to address what the legislature should be doing and what we have to come up with here somehow in Puyallup. Councilmember Johnson, your idea of having townhomes everywhere, that thing is fantastic because I think they avoid all the liabilities that you have with condominiums and they give a fee simple and ownership option. And I think we should embrace those thoroughly. But trial lawyers have made it almost impossible for builders in Washington State to build condominiums. I looked at some data for 2023. 2023, 300 and I believe 76, I believe that was the number, right? 300, let's just say 370 condos were built in Seattle. In Vancouver, British Columbia, over 6,000 condominiums were built. In Washington State, we don't build condominiums. In other cities, in Canada, they build condominiums, but they don't build them here because the liability laws, trial lawyers are so predatory towards the contractors who build them that even the best of them cannot stand up to the predatory nature of the trial lawyers who go after the tenants. And even the smallest defect, they will get a class action lawsuit and they don't have to take them to court. What they do is they say, pay us this much money and we won't bring you to court. Well, because that happens all the time when people build condominiums, it's hard to insure them. And contractors just say, the heck with it, not going to build condos. So Councilmember Johnson, that's why we don't have condominiums in Washington State. It's because the legislature won't stand up to the trial lawyers. And I know that firsthand experience. They won't stand up to the trial lawyers. And if we can come up with a way to remedy around that, I think that's an ideal opportunity. So as you can see, I take a jaundiced view, very skeptical, because I'm very protective of what we've done in Puyallup. We have tried to create a diverse community, economically, racially, otherwise, a diverse community. And I'm trying to protect that ability and also give people the opportunity to own a piece of this city. And I'm afraid that many of the policies you talked about this evening are going to destroy that possibility. And again, I'd like someone to put themselves in my shoes and experience what I do in my neighborhood. And I think if they did, they would see that these policies are very misguided. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Well stated. And I affirm, I echo and ditto everything you stated. I would 100% fall in line with that. I want to add something. And first of all, Kendall, thank you for presenting. And I hope that as we share our perspectives and challenging approach to some of the issues of this, I hope you realize it's not personal, but the professionals bring it to light. We policymakers get to sound this out. So thank you for hearing us through. I want to say, as one who's in industry of real estate, who certainly knows a lot of developers in town, which are wonderful people, I can tell you and I'll affirm, Mr. Mayor, that I also heard from a industry developer who shared with me that investors are watching Tacoma with just eyes of opportunity for when this new bill that they passed that's going to open this thing up to multiple dividing up lots into multiple houses. They see this as a windfall to snatch these up and double, triple, and quadruple their money. Now, from a industry that I'm into, real estate, certainly I would, I can see where there's the appeal. But as a policymaker, as one who lives in this town, who looks at it from a bigger picture, I really resent that blanket approach applying to Puyallup in the same manner that other cities are seen to be opening up the gates for that. And it really goes back to, Mr. Mayor, when you said, you know, we want to remain a city that gives, and I think Councilmember Whitting mentioned the same thing. We want a city that gives people opportunity to buy a piece of the rock and to live here and raise their family and retire and maybe pass on here as their last residence. And so if we implement some of these radical mandates that perhaps are good intention, what we'll have is if that's allowed carte blanche, we'll have plenty of people who will be investing, but it will not be families, like the majority of investors. And when we've seen this happen in a analogy that I think plays it very well, and it's if you've ever watched It's a Wonderful Life, you got the person that's looking out for the small guy to be able to buy a place, and then you've got Pottersville that wants to buy it and turn it all into rentals, and we know that turns into slumlords and all kinds of issues. And there's a place for rentals, don't get me wrong, but I do believe that our ratio, as we know, of 48%, 52% home ownership gap between renters and home ownership is far too narrow for Puyallup. And we need to be looking at ways to increase housing and affordable housing for people to start their first home purchase, to build equity and be able to move on to something else in a manner that's going to widen that gap and not have that overpower with more rentals. So I think there's some work to be done. Mr. Mayor, I think that there's some work to be done to encourage the state to, if they want high density housing, especially around transit centers, then they should have it on the first plate for business to discuss is abolishing this liability law for condos and allow developers to be able to provide micro condos that will give people entry level singles, single individuals, first time home buyers, elderly folks who want to downsize into something smaller but still have ownership. The condos would really allow that. So that should be something we should be encouraging our elected officials to take a look at. And I hope that we are catalyst to provide that for our town, but also across our state. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Further questions? Okay, let's move on to 1B, which is land use map, suggested areas of study overview. Kendall, please.
All right. So for the land use map, I'll give a little bit of background of why this is coming before you and kind of the premise of this. But then we'll kind of walk through the different study areas that we've received and identified, and then we'll have kind of a wrap up. So typically for map amendments, we accept privately initiated applications from applicants once a year, and then we process it with our annual amendments to the comprehensive plan within that year. With the periodic update, council adjusted that timeline so that we did not accept private applications for 2022 and 2023. I think that's actually 2023 and 2024. Oh, sorry, that is what it says. So we had a little bit of a different cycle for the last couple of years. And with that, we gave an opportunity for the public to request what we're calling study areas, but essentially map amendments for specific sites in the city that we would then process more as a city initiated map amendment rather than a private application. So this is what we're bringing before you, or some of those requests that we received, but also staff has identified a few areas just through inquiries and different situations that we think are sites that could be ready for a map amendment as well. And just as a reminder of kind of how these different maps work together, we have the future land use map that lives in the city's comprehensive plan. It puts a future land use designation on all properties that are within the city's urban growth area. So that can be outside of city limits or within city limits. And then the zoning map is implemented by that future land use map. And zoning is only applied to properties that are within city limits. So upon annexation, we would apply zoning consistent with that underlying future land use map. And then we also have zoning overlays, which can apply to, it lives on the zoning map. We don't have them everywhere, but it can be different things like design standards, or it could be protections for agricultural land. There's just different ways you can use zoning overlays. So just as a high level of kind of how these different things work together. So first, I'm just going to walk through the staff identified properties. This first one is owned by WashDOT. It's located up on South Hill, kind of on the on-ramp onto 512, and kind of near the park and ride off of 9th. It's currently designated as public facility, and based on that ownership of it being owned by WashDOT, they've been trying to sell the property for several years now. We've received inquiries from interested buyers wanting to do multifamily, but we kind of want to look at the area as a whole and see what makes most sense. But we're leaning towards some kind of residential, whether it's single family or maybe a moderate density residential. That's something that we would kind of study further and bring back to you at a future date. But just to show you the existing zoning for the parcel in the surrounding area, you can see that there's RS10 to the north and to the west. And then there's the freeway there to the south.
Kendall, I have a question.
Yeah.
Councilmember Whitting.
Mr. Mayor, I went through this PowerPoint before the meeting, and there's a lot of individual plots and so forth that are going to be discussed tonight. And I was wondering if it made sense for us to discuss each one of them as they come along rather than waiting till the end, because I'm old and I've got a short memory.
I think that's an excellent idea. I would ask this, that as tempting as it is, I'd like not to make actual recommendations this evening on these parcels. I'd like this to be our first kind of brush with it, and so that we can go out and look at these, think about them. I hope you're not looking for any kind of decision tonight.
No decisions being asked of you tonight, but if there are, if there's certain information that would be helpful for us to bring back to you for a specific property, typically we would bring you stuff like what kind of critical areas are on the site or nearby, kind of basic site awareness. But if you know more about the property or need to know more about the area, that would be helpful for us to know.
That's very fair. Councilmember Whitting, if you'd like to ask on this one, I think that's an excellent idea.
Okay, so this is public facilities, but WashDOT doesn't need it, so it's going to be sold. So that public facility designation isn't appropriate, I wouldn't think. So the question is, what kind of zoning would you suggest? The surrounding areas are RS10, which is pretty low density, and it's right there by the park and ride. Seems like would be a wonderful place for a RM zone or a smaller RS designation.
Yeah, so that's something that we'll be considering. I think there are some utility challenges too with this site, so that's something that we'll want to take into consideration to make sure that whatever we do recommend the zoning change to be, that it would be feasible for future.
Clearly there isn't any other multifamily in that immediate vicinity. And we've always got to pay attention to what the existing neighborhoods are and try and do something that is consistent and preserves the neighborhoods. But it seems like this would be a good site to get some additional density. Thank you.
I have a question regarding the piece of property on the other side of the road. Is that I may be asking a very obvious, question here, or one that can be answered very obviously, but nevertheless, I'm going to ask it. Is that a parcel of property on the other side that is all developable?
Are you looking on the west side?
Yes.
I believe some of that is, yes.
Just wonder if DOT has ever considered, because I see that, and there's a lot of garbage in there, and I go by, have to clean up, et cetera. On the other side of the other, we're not looking at the same,
No,
correct?
I don't think we are.
Right on the other side of the on-ramp, that big piece of property there.
So the part that's highlighted in yellow is a parcel in that region. Are
Yeah,
you looking kind of to the south of the PF parcel?
yes, yes.
The rest of it, I believe, is all just owned by WashDOT. It's not a parcel. It's just right of way, if you will.
Understand. I mean, it may be too landlocked, but I just wondered if that was an option. Councilmember Adler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Kendall. Appreciate your presentation on both items this evening. First, I'm going to ask for forgiveness for asking a very basic question, but I want to make sure that I understand. So these are staff identified properties where there has been interest.
So these ones, like for this one in particular, we get a lot of calls about it because the state has had it up for sale for a long time. And the challenge is the fact that it's zoned PF and they don't know what the zoning would be. So there's, they don't want to purchase it without knowing what their zoning would be. And we can't provide really assurances that way. So that's why we identified this one in particular. And that's an example.
I'm with you. I'm with you now. I'm with you. I think I missed the part where it was made clear to me that the properties or the entities in which own these properties are willing partners, if you will. So they are interested in selling, or they've had their property up for sale for however long. And
we have tried to reach out to WashDOT about this particular parcel and haven't really received any information from them. But the fact that it's up for sale and there's interest in it, I think they would like to offload it. So I don't think that there's issues that way, but definitely something that we want to make sure that they're agreeable to, for sure.
Okay, I'm with you now. I just needed to talk it out. I am interested about what you said, that you and your colleagues are reaching out to WashDOT and you're hitting a brick wall. I would love to triage that with you all. Thank you.
Okay, may I interpret did you just say that you would like to be able to be a liaison with DOT, correct?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just offer to help staff get in touch with someone at WashDOT that I know will help staff and reply to us.
Okay, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate that offer. Thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to follow up to the last several comments. So Kendall, the mayor referred to that parcel to the south. It's that kind of green area with looks to appear to be a kind of carved out single family dwelling or something in there. Am I understanding safely to say that whole parcel is owned by WashDOT, or everything but the single family is owned by WashDOT? Do we know who owns that whole parcel? Yes.
I can't say for certain. I believe that this is privately owned, but I would have to double check on that. But this area here along the on-ramp and the freeway, that is WashDOT.
Okay. I'd just like to offer a thought. It's such a high density area. 94th Street is a major, kind of side arterial that is well used. Got, that big complex to the east. That is, hotel and a church and a business complex and several hotels, McDonald's. Just kitty corner to the southeast, you got the South Hill Mall, if I see correctly. What a valuable piece of, commercial space that washed off. They want to unload this back one. Be nice to find out there's some contingency to unload at least the front half of that facing 94th that might stimulate some other commercial uses. I'd be curious to find out if they would be interested in a package deal for rezoning that, perhaps as a possibility for development, but just an idea. Wanted to throw it out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Whitting, you had a comment?
I just wanted to comment. I've looked at that property and I believe that carve out in there is a utility, some utility stuff. Not sure exactly what it is, but it's not a residence or anything. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that information. It would be very interesting to see what the status of that was, that particular piece of property. I only know because the police have to go in there and clean up, and I've been by there. I get complaints about that area, and getting something in there, some business, some structure wouldn't be a bad idea. It'd be kind of killing two birds with one stone as far as getting commercial business in there. So with that, go ahead and move on.
Okay. All right, so the next one is two parcels that are on the corner of Tacoma Road and West Pioneer. Now these ones, we have not reached out to the property owners yet. This was just one that staff had identified. In particular, the property on the corner, both uses are pre-existing non-conforming uses because the zoning is single-family residential, but they're more commercial uses. The property on the corner is like an auto service property, and then the other one is kind of more of like a mini neighborhood mart. But the one on the corner was for sale for a while, and we received a lot of inquiries about the property, and some from neighboring property owners and people in the neighborhood kind of interested in it and wanting to see more of a neighborhood serving commercial use, that not so much the auto service use, but the way our non-conforming code works is it could either be continued or it would have to revert to the zoning, which would be a single family use. And so it was really limited on what could happen there. But we heard from wanting to do coffee shop or a florist or some kind of smaller commercial use there. So that's why we had identified this one as potentially being a good one for a neighborhood serving commercial use. And we were looking at our limited mixed use might be a good option, because then there could be some residential and commercial allowances. And then we figured with that other non-conforming commercial use, it also of the mini mart, it made sense to kind of look at both of these parcels with that consideration. So this is why we brought this one before you. And then here is the existing zoning. So you can see that the RS10 and the surrounding neighborhoods there of single family residential.
Go ahead and proceed. Please, members, if you have Councilmember Johnson, I see your hand there. I apologize.
Thank you, Mayor. Kendall, I just want to chime in again at first blush. There's something very appealing, and I just live around the corner from this. And I can tell you there's something very appealing about a quaint, small community commercial vibe. It reminds me of going back, kind of like many of my colleagues might remember, it's still in existence, but that little Golden Rule neighborhood store right by the high school. There's something kind of quaint about that. And even this Puyallup Food Center and so forth, it'd be nice to have zoning that would allow very small neighborhood commercial usage that wouldn't be massive or invading on there, but also recognizing that putting a single family home in there really probably wouldn't be the most ideal use of that space. So I would at first blush support a limited use commercial that would, you know, broaden it out for future uses on a neighborhood level, you know, coffee shop or whatever would fit in a smaller neighborhood vibe on there. I just think there's something kind of special about that. So just want to put that out there as first blush.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead and proceed.
So this next one is for 3 properties over off of Todd Road, kind of in North Puyallup area. And there's the 3 parcels here that are highlighted. Right now, they have a designation of high density residential, RM20. And we're considering a potential zoning and land use map change or considering a zoning overlay. This is kind of a special circumstance, and in this area, there was a concomitant agreement that was in place upon annexation for this area of the city. And previously, it had been interpreted that that agreement was the agreement allowed for additional uses beyond what the existing zoning allowed. And the interpretation had been that that was ongoing. And that is what staff had told interested buyers for these properties when they purchased them. However, we received some newer information of a new interpretation that found that actually the concomitant agreement essentially it's sunsetted. It's no longer should be in effect to allow these additional uses. So we really are trying to work with those current property owners to find a solution that would allow them to do what they want to do. We have the property here on the end, and I think probably the property in the middle are looking to do more of a ML use, a limited manufacturing use. So a contractor storage yard with an office is kind of the general idea. The property on the other side initially was interested in that and then kind of switched gears to look at multifamily use because of the zoning. But we've informed them that we're kind of looking at this for all 3 parcels. And so they're kind of going back and considering what direction they want to go. So we're really kind of working with those property owners and then also taking into consideration the surrounding area there with there's an apartment complex there to the south, but it does have a natural buffer in between that is a creek. So it has a vegetated buffer beyond that that's protected. There's also some existing manufacturing uses a little bit to the southwest and on the west side there. So that's kind of the history with this one and also why we're considering some changes there. This next one is an old fire station property. It's kind of an interesting one that it is within city limits, but it's kind of surrounded by our urban growth area. The city previously owned it, but it has sold it to Central Pierce. And so right now the zoning is a single family designation, and the consideration is to potentially change it to public facility. And I also want to note that we are considering making a change to public facility in that we are considering going away with the public facility future land use designation, but still maintaining it as a zone that could be applied to any of our future land use designations. The idea being to streamline the process for say, for example, the school district, when they purchase a property, they have to come in and request a future land use map amendment with a rezone. If we were to go this route and not require that future land use map change, but allow more of a simple rezone process that could go through the hearing examiner and be done outside of our annual amendment cycle to the comprehensive plan. So that is something that we're considering with this one, as well as there's some school district requests too that I'll get to in the PowerPoint.
I'm a little confused on this piece of property. I thought it was a fire station at one time.
I think it was.
So that would be public facilities, correct?
Well, the existing zoning right now is single family. I think we might have changed it previously for selling the property, if I remember correctly. Because I think it might have been PF, but we changed it to single family, and now we're potentially going back to PF because of the sale.
I thought it was in the actual deed, and I could have this one confused with the one on Shaw Road, but I thought it was in the deed that in fact that it had to be a public facilities from that point forward. Correct?
It is the Shaw Road one.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor.
all right.
Yeah.
Well, my mistake. Okay, fine. Proceed.
So then this is just showing the existing land use in this area, since we don't have zoning applied to the surrounding properties, for just information there. So it has a low density residential surrounding it, and then there's some limited manufacturing and warehousing beyond. So now these are the Puyallup School District requests. There are several properties here that surround or are kind of now part of the Puyallup High School campus area that were recently acquired by the school district. They have a single family zoning designation, and they're requesting that it goes to public facility.
That seems to make sense to me, but
Okay.
again, we'll put off the kind of decisions. Go ahead.
This next one is near Sparks Stadium. It's another property that they recently acquired right next to the stadium, and it's single family zoned now, but they're requesting it be changed to public facility. And then this next one shows you the existing zoning.
Okay.
And then this is their facility up on South Hill, and it currently has a split designation. This might kind of show you a little bit better. This portion of the property is zoned PF, but this portion over here is community business. I believe there was a lot line adjustment that was done to combine these parcels, and so that created the split designation. So they're just requesting to clean that up and change that portion to public facility, so the entire parcel is zoned PF.
Oh, excuse me, Councilmember Johnson. Oh,
Thank
you
Mayor.
you go ahead and proceed, and then we'll have City Manager Kirkley after you. Go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Kendall, I want to just focus before you rush on this one. I'm familiar with this one. This is up on the hill. This is near Costco. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. I have a little bit of hesitation on the other ones downtown. Makes pretty much sense. I'm just a little bit of pause. I'd love to study this a little more. Because I don't know what are the parcels to the south and north currently zoned at, and would this change or proposed change really kind of foul up or take away from this whole section of potential future growth? Because Costco is, a pretty big player there. There might be some other large significant commercial that they want to come in there and develop that, and with that having that inserted PF deal in the middle of that affect that for future uses?
I don't know that it would affect the other parcels, since it is under the school district's ownership, but it is zoned community business there to the south and north and the east side of the parcel.
So hypothetically, let me just ask some questions. Let's say that the council decided not to grant this particular one for whatever reasons, if in fact they should, at kind of a scenario, by not changing this public facilities zoning, would that hinder their expansion or use? Or is it necessary to have that for them to expand that?
That's something that we can take a look at. I haven't fully thought about that. I don't know what their future plans are either for that portion of the parcel. So I think that would be important to take into
Well,
account to answer
I
that.
would just go back to Kendall, your comment on a much smaller scale, and I'm just wondering here, are we, reacting to something that should have been talked about before they purchased it hypothetically? So for example, remember you were mentioning that small little gas station, people wanted to buy it and convert it to some other kind of usage, but it wasn't zoned for that, so therefore they walked away. My thought is, did the school system buy this thinking they want to use it for something with the hopes that we would change the zoning? But if we don't, would that hinder their ability to use it? And if so, that would be kind of an interesting way of going about it. And it would like to know, if we did not do a zoning change, would that hinder their ability to use it or not? And then based off of that, maybe kind of figure out, is that good in the best interest of that whole very high value commercial industry? This is, as I understand, if I recall right, this is not a facility that has a lot of student usage. It's kind of a limited use and more of an admin. So I would just really want to check that one out a little bit more from a holistic standpoint to see how that might negatively affect the value of that whole section next to Costco for future development.
All right,
I did-
Councilmember Whitting.
I'd just like to weigh in on this. That school district facility up there includes a lot of different things. There's their commercial kitchen that serves meals to the whole school district is located in that more north building. They've got the lower building in the south end of things is more academic oriented, but so there's a number of things going on there, and I would not want to hamstring the school district in any way in providing the services they do to their students. So I'd be inclined to do this. In terms of those couple of parcels to the north and south of the add-on, they've got good access to both of those. That road that circles Costco, it goes down to the storage center there by the freeway. You could put a driveway into that northernmost piece that looks a little bit landlocked there, and that area just to the left as you go into from the light into the Costco area is very open to development as it is. So given that the school district has bought this property presumably for a purpose, I would not want to hamstring them and would want them to be able to do what they need to provide the services they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Oh, City Manager Steve Kirkley.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just want to correct the record. Just that, Mayor, you had mentioned about the North Puyallup Fire Station, and I don't mean to go back, but you are correct. Actually, the deed does say for the North Puyallup Fire Station. So Shaw Road and both North Puyallup have to be used for a public purpose. So just wanted to make sure the record is clear on that.
I guess it's really not that consequential. Just curious how it was changed from, because if it is, in fact, in the deed says that, then how was it changed to residential? And now we're going to go back to public. It's okay.
Yeah, the
It
deed-
really,
yeah.
It doesn't matter. Okay, go ahead, proceed.
Okay, so the next few slides are the Washington State Fair's request. They have a number of parcels, so we'll kind of walk through these. There's kind of categorized into 4 different amendment areas. The blue outlined parcels is just signifying parcels that are owned by the Washington State Fair. And then the different symbology is showing the different amendments, and we'll kind of walk through those. So the first one is the parcels that have that kind of thicker hatching over it. And these parcels have a underlying, I believe, yes, So these parcels already have an underlying land use designation of fair, but their zoning differs from that. There's kind of a mix of commercial, multifamily, and single-family zoning on those ones. And so they're requesting that they be rezoned to fair zoning, as that is the implementing zone for the fair land use. And this next one is the Second Amendment area, and it's a little bit different from the last in that these parcels don't have the underlying future land use designation of fair. But they're requesting that the land use and zoning change to fair. So this would change from, I believe they're generally multifamily residential and single family zones, and they'd want to change those to fair. Oh, and just a quick note that the parcels that are outlined in green over here off of 9th Avenue Southwest were brought to our attention that they have the fair land use designation currently, but they're not owned by the fair. So they were saying that might be a good cleanup of changing those back to a low density residential since they're not under their ownership. And this is just showing that underlying land use for those properties there that are outlined in green.
Could you possibly briefly say what is involved? I don't want to go into too much detail, but what's involved when you're designated as fair zoning? What does that mean?
They have different zoning allowances, and I will be honest, I'm not as familiar with that zoning designation, but it's definitely tailored to the fairgrounds and the types of uses that they have going on there. So I don't know how exactly it would change. I know from, residential to fair, that's going to be more of a commercial change. But I don't know from the other residential zones how specific that will be of a change for those ones in particular. But we can definitely bring that back to you when this comes back around.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm curious on this one too. I didn't realize we had a fair zoning. And so I'd like to know with fair zoning, Kendall, what type of uses are they opened up to use it for? Can it be used for a myriad of 12, 15 different things, or is it open-ended? Tell me what a fair zone it could future use. Could they say, hey, we want to use this fair zone, we want to put X, Y, Z in there? Can we at least know some parameters?
Yes, we'll definitely bring that back to you.
Yeah, because that would be super important to know that. Thank you.
Thank you. Proceed.
So this next one has to do with the fair parking overlay. So the dotted symbol is showing where the overlay is currently and where it's currently applied. And there's actually a section here that's on the fairgrounds. It's kind of a remnant that they're saying that could be removed. But then they're asking that it be applied to the parcels that have this thicker diagonal line across them. So these parcels have been under Washington State Fair ownership for a long time and have been used as parking. So in their opinion, it's kind of more of a cleanup that we're just kind of recognizing these as existing fair parking areas. It can help when they need to do any maintenance of those lots so that they don't run into any conformance issues.
Councilmember Johnson.
My apologies, Mayor. I forgot to take my hand down on the last one, but no interest at this point.
That's fine. Go ahead.
And then this last one is similar to, I believe it was Amendment 2, but there's these parcels here on the north of 9th Avenue Southwest that have some hatching on them. And they currently do not have fair land use or zoning, and they're requesting that those change to the fair designation. It's kind of north of their administrative offices and also have been in their ownership and kind of considering the conversion of Ninth Avenue to a festival drive in the future. That's kind of a reasoning why they'd like to see those ones converted as well.
Understand. Just, I think you probably already noted this, but everything in blue,
The
Is
outlines, yes.
that they own that. That
Yes.
is part of the fair
Mhm.
parcels. So when you look north of Ninth Avenue, from those designations that you see on this slide, those are like individual home lots
Mhm.
would be, for example, those that they own. Okay,
Yes,
got it.
correct.
Councilmember Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this one, Kendall, is especially heightened for me to know what a fair designation would allow for future development. So before I could weigh in on this one, I really need to know what future allowances would be if we went to fair deals. That's super, super important, and I hope we can get that answer sooner than later.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
So now these are kind of, we're putting them in the other private property requests category. This parcel is in our urban growth area, so it's not annexed into the city. And it currently has a future land use designation of rural buffer residential. And they are asking that, oh, excuse me, it's currently low density residential and they're requesting rural buffer residential so that they would like this area to be annexed into the city in the future. And so they're kind of thinking ahead that way. And it would help facilitate the property to be designated with the ARO zoning, which is kind of our agricultural recreation and open space designation in the future when it's annexed. So with this one in particular, we would want to take a look at more than just one parcel to redesignate. So we kind of need to look further in this area to see what makes sense. And then also we thought we could maybe explore some other options potentially with the property owner. Maybe current use tax is something that they could benefit from. I believe it is used as a farm currently. So just something that we'll be taking a look at and considering as part of the map amendments. And I'll show you here the
Councilmember Johnson.
existing future
Thank-
land use.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kendall, could you tell me what the property to the west of that is? It looks like that commercial from that last screen, the one before this. What is that kind of high density rectangle shapes there? Do we know?
I'm not familiar, so I don't know. I'd be speculating.
That,
Yeah.
that's a storage facility.
Oh, storage facility. Okay. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And I have a question. I was under the understanding that the county, since it's not an incorporated area and being unincorporated, it was under the county's jurisdiction. And even though the GMA asks that the county and the local jurisdiction to which it will eventually belong to, that they cooperate in the actual zoning, did Pierce County actually approach us on this and say that we had jurisdiction, or has there been some resolution that I'm unaware of that gives us the ability to zone? And I say that because the zoning over there is just a mess.
Mhm.
On the North Puyallup, I mean, you have all kinds of things taking place amongst residential, business, residential, all mixed up together. And it doesn't make much sense. So how did this come by us
Mhm.
jurisdiction wise?
So this came from the private property owner. It was a request by them. And we are not going to be applying zoning to the properties in this area. They are not annexed into the city. It would just be a future land use map change in that respect. And the idea being that when the area is annexed and we do apply zoning, that they would get the zoning that they desire. So it would be a future situation for applying zoning.
Understand, I hope that person's aware. I believe that has gone to a vote twice. And it's failed both times, the annexation of that
Yes,
area.
yes, they are familiar, I believe.
Okay, with that, Councilmember Johnson.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. What's the large kind of property mass? I see the golf course there, but west of the golf course, then two west of the golf course. What is that going on? There was no apartments. Where are those?
Yeah, those are apartments.
And then west of that, is that the Safeway, the old Safeway complex there?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, so a lot of high density across the river and a kind of a high concentration of commercial, looks like if you were to mirror, on both sides of the river. So, okay, and a golf course there. So we obviously have a lot of density on that end. And I'm just wondering if anything should be mirrored on that end and any kind of future growth. But again, no comment other than just observation. Thank you.
Councilmember Whitting.
I'm just a little curious as to what the objectives are for the property owner. If he owns it, it's agricultural. If it's annexed to the city, it would be, if he wanted to continue doing agricultural, it would be a non-conforming use, grandfathered in presumably. What is the concern about a different zoning there? Why is he concerned about this?
We have not spoken to this property owner directly. This was just something that was submitted to us and we were bringing for a preview with you, but that will be something that we will talk further through with them to kind of understand their concerns. And that's kind of why we talked about maybe there's some other options for them besides a map change, depending on what their concerns or needs are. So that's something that we'll talk further with them on.
More information to come. Okay, thank you.
So this next one is in the Shaw Pioneer area, and it's a request for 4 parcels here that are to the west of the Shaw Road overpass and north of Pioneer. They currently have well, some of them are split designated, and I believe we can go to the next one here. These ones here are split designated, so they have a general commercial zoning, and then this portion and these 2 parcels are designated as ARO, which is our agricultural, recreation, and open space zone. And they are requesting that the ARO portions be rezoned and redesignated to commercial to be consistent with that existing designation. They noted that just access is really challenging to the site with it being surrounded by rail on 3 sides and then the overpass, and it can be costly to develop that access to Shaw Road. So commercial would make it redevelopment of the property more feasible, as well as the just demand in the area for commercial. They thought that would facilitate the request. And I do want to mention that we received another request for the parcels here highlighted to the north. This one here is split designated with our ML, limited manufacturing zone, and ARO, and the other is all designated ARO, to do the same, essentially to go to the commercial designation with the consideration of the other parcels. However, these parcels have a different situation going on where upon annexation, the county required that they apply a protective covenant to the parcels so that they remain as agricultural uses in the future. And without removing that covenant, staff is not recommending that we move forward with a map amendment for those properties. So we have told that property owner that we would like them to kind of work with the county first to see if there's any support for removal of that protective covenant, and then we would bring it back to council at a future date if there was support, and we could kind of have that policy discussion then. But that's kind of staff's recommendation at this point.
Just for clarification, you're only talking about the green portion here, correct?
The parcels here for request 2, they're kind of highlighted in this blue.
Got it, or blue or green, sorry.
Yes.
Colors may be
And it's
slightly
hard
off.
when they're overlaid too.
Understand. Okay, questions? Go ahead and proceed. Oh, excuse me, Councilmember Johnson.
It's okay. Thanks, Mayor. But could you go back to what the initial yeah, so this one here. So the request is for the outline kind of lime turquoise green, whatever, to be switched to commercial. Is that correct?
Yes, these technically are split zones, so it'd be this portion of this lot and these two are a part of that request, because these two already have general commercial on this portion.
Oh, so okay, does the next plan show that?
Sorry,
Um. So this frame you're at now, is that the same frame as you had in the prior one, but just a magnified view? Is that correct?
yes.
Okay, just first, because this one's cut off, back to the first one here,
Mhm.
prior one. Okay, so are we talking about? Well, so as I'm looking at it initially, you can see that the north half certainly is used as ag farmland, right? So
Mhm.
you can see the crops. I'm assuming that's still current now, but I don't see anything growing or happening on this end. Is that still consistent, or is it just designated ag land, but it's not, hasn't been used for ag land? It's just, it looks more like a homestead.
I don't know the history of the use currently. That's something that we could definitely look into and bring back at a future date.
Well, not so much history, but I'm just saying I don't see any usage as ag land. It may be designated as ag land, but they're not using it. They're just using that northern portion as ag land. And so, and then are you referring to, so as you're looking at this highlighted green area, are you saying that on this particular picture, the property to the east is currently zoned commercial? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so there's already near half already commercial, but this other little triangle piece or whatever it is zoned. Was it ag or is that what it is?
Yes, agricultural, recreation,
Yeah,
open
okay.
space technically.
All right. All right, so then some further questions, Kendall. If I'm stepping back a little bit. This is on the corner of Shaw and Pioneer. Is my memory safe to say that are all corners, with the exception of this one, already kind of set up as kind of commercial use? I mean, we know this new Safeway went in. The one to the west of Safeway is already commercial. I think there's some projects going on there. Is it fairly consistent with that corner to have commercial highlights within the neighborhood while still maintaining the zoning, on the exterior pieces such as this one on the south, or yeah, on the north, excuse me.
Yeah, I believe the kind of four corners there at Shaw and Pioneer are existing commercial zones. There is, with the exception, I believe, of the southeast corner, which is multifamily that's going in there.
Okay. Okay, great. Yeah, that answers some questions. Thank you, Ken.
Councilmember Whitting.
There appears to be a couple of residences on in this area. And I'm just wondering where the access and egress is on this property. Is it to the northeast? Does it go under the overpass there? Is that the access to that area?
I believe there is limited access over the tracks to the south, is my general understanding. But it's very limited. You wouldn't be able to kind of convert it to commercial and maintain access for just the volume that would be crossing there.
Yeah, there's that little commercial area to the west of it has a more established access, but those ones below, there isn't much of railroad crossing there for those other ones. Okay, thank you.
Proceed.
And I think this is our last one. It's the Minnick property. That's the name of the property owners currently. It's a large parcel that's kind of north of Wildwood Park off of 9th Street Southeast. There are some critical areas on this parcel. It's currently undeveloped and they are I believe trying to sell the property and have received information from just buyers interested in doing different types of development there. Right now, it's designated as a single family, low density, single family residential RS10. So they're requesting something more of a higher density residential or something that would support assisted care, living care use that could potentially have a connection to multi-care. I believe they have a parcel there to the east side, and then there's obviously the hospital nearby. So I think they were thinking there could be a connection made with those uses. And then here is the existing zoning map. It is zoomed in a little bit to the parcel.
Councilmember Whitting.
You know, looking at this parcel, it would seem like it'd be a prime opportunity for some fee simple row houses, but given the shape of the property. So the an RM10 would make sense to me. Thanks.
Keep in mind that the one that is just due east of that says RS10, that very long piece of property. We own that. That was the piece of property that we purchased so that we could actually have the trail go from Wildwood Park all the way down to the valley floor for the new park that we have there. So I'm not sure how they're going to connect both of those, considering there's going to be a trail right there that goes. And they can't put a road there because we have a trail.
Right.
Okay. Go ahead, proceed.
So then it was just what we already talked about. Is there any additional information that would be helpful and generally supportive of us moving forward studying these amendment areas?
Again, I would ask us not to, I think there's probably, and by the questions, generally interest. But in no way do I want to give any kind of affirmative.
Sure.
So if anybody's watching this evening, understand that these will require more study and that we'll come back at another date with some definitive answers on this. So don't panic, I guess. If you're somebody out there who is either for this or against it, it will require more study. Okay.
Great. That's all.
Is that it?
Yep.
Okay, well, excellent. Thank you very much for your patience and diligence this evening
Thank you.
through all of this. You've been here now for what? Geez, a few hours. So thank you. With that, we're going to move on to the citizen comments portion of the meeting. If you haven't filled out a form, you can fill one out right now if you'd like to. If not, I usually open these up so that after these are, we start with these. And if no one else at that point has submitted them, we just have anyone who would like to come forward, say who they are, and you're more than welcome to provide testimony. If the clerk could go ahead and read the guidelines for testimony, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This time is reserved for a public comment on tonight's agenda topics only. The mayor will call on those who have provided their names in advance. The mayor then will call for other citizens who wish to speak. For the record, please state your name and address and/or city council district in which you reside. Please direct all comments to the council as a whole, not individual council members. All comments are limited to 2 minutes. The clerk will provide verbal notice when only 30 seconds remain. As a reminder, this portion of the meeting is council's opportunity to hear from the community and not to engage in debate. Lastly, per state law, this public comment period cannot be to speak in support of or in opposition to a ballot measure or individual candidacy, and/or no such comments will be allowed.
Okay, thank you. With that, Paul Romich, please.
Thank you, Mayor Castelo. Paul Romich, District 1. Our neighborhoods are already changing. They can either become more exclusive and more expensive or more inclusive and more productive. and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Freddie Mac identified that there is currently a 1.5 million unit housing shortage across both rentals and ownership nationwide, right? Obviously, Washington probably experiencing a bigger brunt of that than maybe some of the Rust Belt states. But and additionally, for new construction, 11% of new housing have one or two bedrooms, yet 64% of households are one or two people. So there's a big mismatch of what's being built versus what people actually need. And so when it comes to this is why the state has, created these middle housing laws, because I mean, yes, there are some barriers like the condo association or condo liability law, but there's also other barriers that exist within our city code, that is our zoning. And so that's why they're looking to change that so we can better meet the needs of Washingtonians. Additionally, some of the issues you have issues with can be easily solvable, right? You mentioned that cars are an issue, right? It's due to the fragility and inefficiency of cars, right? With parking. If
30 seconds.
Puyallup was better served by transit, we wouldn't need 6 units to have 12 cars, right? People, my household, right? We only have my wife has a car. I don't. I get by without her car in the summers. And so yeah, it works well and works great. And then additionally, what I wanted to talk about was the fair zoning. Fair zoning does expand the amount of property they can acquire for parking lots, which are unproductive, to 2,000 feet within the fair zoning. So that could be
Mr. Mayor, the speaker has reached 2 minutes.
expanding that zoning. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. Always good to hear from you. Would anyone else like to speak? I see Mr. Burnham is here this evening. Steve?
Yeah, I'll just introduce myself. Hello, this is Steve Burnham. I'm a partner with Campbell Barnett Law Firm here just down the street. And I'm here on behalf of the property owner in request for the Shaw Road #2. And we'll be working with the county. And I just wanted to let you know that that's who I am. So if you wondered who I am, that's why I'm here tonight, is to hear your comments about that. So thank you.
Okay. And if you're available afterwards, if anyone has questions, they can go ahead and talk to you. I'm sure it's always good to see you, Steve. With that, I believe we're at the very end of the study session. And if there are no further comments by members, and there's no executive session, correct? With that, hearing no objection, we're going to adjourn. Thank you.